through your system, leaching as much as he can get his hands on because he's just doing his job. So this is where science had gotten this far. They said, oh, it's the phytic acid, and phytic acid exists in everything that's basically a seed. Oats are very high in phytic acid. Chocolate is really high in phytic acid. It pains me because I love chocolate. But there are all these, things that are seeds or legumes that are meant to be able to be planted that are very high in phytic acid. So you get this same process happening regardless of whether it's wheat or not. So, but the science had just said, oh my goodness, it's phytic acid. This is the problem. You shouldn't be eating any of these grains, really, but primarily wheat. Don't eat it. So I then stumbled upon a piece of research from a cancer hospital where they were injecting cancer patients with phytic acid and using it to treat their cancer. And it just, again, I just couldn't reconcile these two. It was like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of thing. It's like, it will kill you, it will save you. It's deadly, it's an antioxidant. Like, how does this work? And the key came with the neutralization. Once phytic acid is done doing that job, once the phytase says, hey, don't worry about it, you can stand down, let all those vitamins and minerals go, not only are those then nutritionally available to you, but at that point, phytic acid begins his second job, which is to snatch up free radicals. He goes through your digestive system. Phytic acid is not digestible. He goes through your digestive system looking for anything that doesn't belong. If it looks funky, if it looks bad, he'll grab it and cart it right out. He takes out the trash for you. Now, you want to talk about a staff of life. That's it. Something that not only gives you maximum nutrition, but also helps your body to rid itself of cancer-causing agents. That is the staff of life that they talk about in the Bible, that they talk about in history. This is why people were able to thrive in their civilizations eating these grains. It was because of this component. So that is the number one thing that natural yeast does for wheat, is it neutralizes the phytic acid. Now, there are other ways that you can neutralize phytic acid to a degree. And I'll give you just a little clue in on that. I'm not going to take a lot of time on it. If for some reason, if you don't have time to bake with natural yeast, if your starter dies and you still want to bake bread and you don't have to worry about the phytic acid, one way that you can remedy that is by making a yogurt bread. If you have yogurt or kefir or even lemon juice can work. What you want to do is create this moist acidic environment. And you'll reduce your, if you're using commercial yeast, you'll reduce your commercial yeast to like 1/4 teaspoon and let it have a long overnight rise. So you would either take part of your liquid and make it yogurt. If you have 2 cups of liquid, make it 1 cup of that be yogurt. Or add a few teaspoons of lemon juice to it. And that will help take care of some of the phytic acid. I like to let people know that because there is that solution. That was the first step I took when I began this path, was doing yogurted breads. But here's the problem, is it doesn't do the other jobs. And there are a lot of other jobs that natural yeast does because there are a lot more organisms than just yeast in here. It's more than just the phytic acid. The natural yeast, the wild yeast, and the lactobacilli that are in here, they feast on the simple sugars in the wheat. So you have these starches in wheat that are these long chains of sugars, and the organisms here go through and begin to break those down. They begin to pre-digest this wheat for you. And it's for this reason that a lot of diabetics can eat naturally yeasted bread without having it cause blood sugar spikes. And they've done studies on this, and this is actually, I'm sorry, I referenced the cookbook because that's where I put my research. They did a study, one in particular, where they took 2 control groups. One they gave naturally yeasted bread, one they gave just standard commercial yeasted bread. 2 hours later, they tested their blood sugar. The naturally yeasted group had stable blood sugar. The commercially yeasted group had a spike in blood sugar. 2 hours later, they then fed them both the commercially yeasted bread. The group that had had the naturally yeasted bread in the beginning did not suffer even a second blood sugar spike, while the commercially yeasted group had a second spike. So it even works preventatively by kind of inoculating you with all these beneficial organisms that help your body digest. So that's a big one, is the sugars. It breaks down the sugars. One of the recipes that I have, and it's actually the basis for the recipe that's on your handout, the honey whole wheat, that comes from a recipe that I made up for my grandma. She's hypoglycemic. She can't eat any bread unless it's naturally yeasted bread or she has a reaction. And I come up with this recipe using coconut oil instead of olive oil or butter, so it would have a lighter texture, lighter flavor. And coconut oil is an amazing natural dough enhancer. I mean, that's like one of its 10 million jobs, right? Coconut oil is just good for you in so many different ways, but it's an amazing dough enhancer. So I had created this recipe for her because she could eat it and not have it affect her hypoglycemia. The second thing that it does is it tames the gluten. It strengthens it, but it kind of turns it into another substance. Could we get a mixing spoon? Do we have one out? I'll show you what I mean in just a second. I'll pull some of this up for you so you can take a look at it. But what happens is it changes the nature of the gluten a little bit. If you picture like a rough 2x4, and then you take some sandpaper to it until it's smooth and you can run your hand over it and not get any splinters, that's kind of, in a rough sense, what is happening with the gluten. The aggressive aspects are being removed, are being tamed, and so it is not, it is not as problematic to a digestive system. Now, when you've got this wheat that's in our digestive system, something that does not want to be consumed, it is not meant to be there. It's trying to not be in your system. It's trying to get out so it can make its plant, right? It functions in your body kind of like a splinter. If you've ever, I'm assuming we've all had splinters, right? And what happens if you don't take it out right away? Your skin, it festers, your skin gets inflamed, it gets puffy, it gets kind of like that water retention right around it. It gets hot, it gets irritated. If you know anyone who has wheat-related issues, or if you have them yourself, you know that is very similar to what our bodies do when we put this aggressive wheat into our bodies. They get irritated, inflamed, water retention, all of these different things, because our body's trying to create a buffer. Our body's trying to protect us from what we're consuming that is not good for it. So that kind of takes me to how this, my cookbook came to be. I had started making naturally yeasted bread for my family, and I started taking a writing class in American Fork. I was living in Lehigh at the time, and as I was bringing my fiction to class, I quickly realized that my bread was much better than my fiction. And so I started bringing bread to class with my fiction, and I found that when my teacher had a nice buttered loaf of naturally yeasted bread in his hand, he was a lot less critical of the stories I was bringing to class. And he liked the bread so much that he said, let's do a trade. I'll let you come to class for free if you bring me bread. I said, deal, that works for me. So after a few weeks of me paying for my classes in bread, what I didn't know is that he had been on Prevacid for acid reflux and esophageal ulcers for over a decade. If you know anything about Prevacid, it's one of those medicines that they give you and sometimes they don't even tell you this, but it's the way that it works, is we're going to give you this medicine that will save your life now so that it can kill you later in a different way. It's this catch-22, you take this thing that keeps you alive and well for now until your body can't take the medicine anymore and you basically die from the Prevacid. So he had been taking this for a long time, and one day he went to take his medicine and he looked at his pill box and realized that he hadn't taken his Prevacid for a week. And that had never happened because he would instantly have these flare-ups, get these ulcers. And so he thought, the only thing different is I started eating this hippie bread that Melissa's bringing me. Because I told him all the nutritional benefits, and he was like, crazy lady. And so he thought, this is what I'll just stick with this. I'm not going to take my medicine and see how it goes.